Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you, and I'm glad you're here, or whether you are at our West Vancouver campus, East Vancouver campus, or Battleground campus, or watching online. Thanks for joining us in part 4 of Let's Talk About Abortion. If you have a Bible, I'd love you to turn to Isaiah chapter 6. We'll get there in just a second. The book of Isaiah has 3 chapters that are most popular, common, or often quoted in our culture. Isaiah 53, which is about the suffering servant. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastisement that brought us peace is upon him. By his wounds we've been healed. Isaiah 40 is very common and popular. I love that chapter where he's like a shepherd. We're like his lambs. He carries them in his arms, carries them close to his heart, and he gently leads those who have young. And then it ends with those who wait on the Lord. Their strength is renewed. They'll fly like wings of eagles, run and not grow weary, walk and not be faint. And then the third chapter that's most well known is Isaiah 6. This is where the angels around the throne room of God endlessly saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." After that moment that Isaiah witnesses, the next scene is also, this next verse at least, is well known, although what follows it is not often talked about. It's Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8 that says this: "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send and who will go for us?' Then I said," Isaiah, who just witnessed this event around the throne of God, said, "Here am I, send me." It's a beautiful verse and a beautiful response to seeing the greatness of God, and it is the story of many people who are missionaries around the world. There came a moment in their life where they felt called to go somewhere and do something that was hard. And their response was, because of who God is, "Here am I, send me." But we often stop there. And at the end of verse 8, which is so encouraging, and yes, full submission to God, and I'm going to do what God has called me to do. We often don't go to verse 9 and beyond, and you'll see why, because it's not overly encouraging. Verse 9 says, "He said, go and tell this people, be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused, make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed." Then I said, "For how long, Lord?" And he answered, "Until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken. And though a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste." So the context of this passage is he sees this moment around the throne of God, and then he is thinking about his own context, and he asks this question, or he volunteers, "Here am I, send me." The Lord says, who's going to deliver the message that needs to be delivered? And Isaiah says, "I'm here. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." And it often is given in this context of people that commit themselves to doing the work of ministry and going somewhere in the world to do it. And that's a beautiful application of it. However, what's interesting is God didn't send Isaiah around the world. God sent him to his own people. He said, "Go and tell this people." And what are they supposed to tell them? And he describes the people then. "Be ever hearing but never understanding, seeing but never perceiving." In other words, tell this people, you hear what I'm saying, but you're not capturing what it means. You're seeing what's happening around you, but you don't understand the implications of it. It's not good news. In fact, I think, as far as I can remember, this is the only prophecy that's mentioned in all 4 Gospels and the book of Acts. This is an important message to God's people. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts, this idea of you hear, but you don't really hear. You see, but you don't really see. And so, yes, Isaiah, okay, go to your people and tell them the truth, but they're not going to listen to you. And so Isaiah then asks the question in verse 11, how long do I have to do this? If they're not going to hear me, how long do I have to do it? And the answer is until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged. Basically, he says, it will be until almost all the people have been exiled to Babylon. There'll be only 10% of the people left just to take care of the land. But keep doing it. In other words, it doesn't mean you stop delivering truth only, or if it's not accepted. You keep delivering truth. And we've talked about in this series quite a bit that it feels like most Christians that I talk to, when this issue comes up of pro-choice versus pro-life, because of 2 extremes, Christians often want to back away. One angle, one extreme is they have people that have clear convictions, but they're silent on compassion. So they turn people off. It seems like they're full of hatred and anger, not love. It seems like the only people they love are the unborn in the womb, but it certainly doesn't seem like they love the single moms going through this incredible difficulty of an unplanned pregnancy. On the other side are people that have deep compassion, but they don't seem to have conviction. So they simply are focused on the woman, and the baby gets ignored. And so Christians don't like either of these two extremes, so we tend to back away into silence. And I'm urging us through this series that we need to engage in conversations, but to do it in ways with clear conviction and deep compassion. Not either or, but both. Recognizing that in our culture, the perception is those that have clear convictions but not deep compassion for the mother are focused only on the baby and don't focus on the mother. And that's not good. And on the other side are people that are full of compassion and they focus on the mother and they don't really want to talk about the baby. And that's not good either. So we need to step forward and with deep compassion for both the woman and the baby. Help people see clearly the moral implications. We talked about what the Bible says on this issue in week 1. We talked about what science says and human rights says and social justice says. And we need to, with deep compassion for both the woman and the baby, not either or, help them see that there's only one option in which both come out alive. But then to do that, that unplanned pregnant woman is going to need incredible love, care, and support. And who's going to give it to her? It needs to be us. So in concluding this series, what I want to do is I want to talk about 3 common objections to a pro-life position. In week number 1, we looked at what does the Bible say about the unborn. In week number 2, we looked at science and social justice and human rights and women's rights. In week number 3, we looked at common statements that are often heard in our culture. My body, my choice. What about rape and incest? Those kinds of things. And today I want to talk about 3 statements that are commonly made about those that would be willing to step forward and say, man, I don't think abortion's good. I don't think abortion on demand is healthy. I don't think elective abortion is right. There's 3 responses that are commonly given, and they're commonly given in the last few months. And you may or may not be familiar with these, so I may introduce them and you'll say, I've never heard that before. If you're in discussions and dialogues with people, these are the responses you will get. And I want to help you think through them. I'm not trying to arm you with an argument to win. I'm trying to equip you so that you're not afraid of what they say that it will cause you to back away. So let me just go through 3 of them. The first one is this. Christians are pro-birth, they're not pro-life. Christians are pro-birth, not pro-life. And the idea is that the accusation is made that Christians, all you care about is getting the baby born. And once the baby is born, you don't care after that. You're not pro-life, you're pro-birth. And a statement might look like this. If Christians aren't involved in other justice issues for children, then you're pro-birth, not pro-life. So if you want to make sure the baby is born, then you better equally be involved in things like foster care, adoption, poverty, child abuse, food insecurity, education, health care, homelessness. It's very common to say the only people that have a right to speak on the abortion issue, if you're opposed to abortion, you're only allowed to speak if you've adopted children. Otherwise, you're just pro-birth, you're not pro-life. And this has been an effective statement that causes many Christians to grow more silent and back away. So how would we respond to this? There's 2 responses, or 2 thoughts that I think are helpful to keep in mind. The first one is this. This is an inaccurate assumption. It's just inaccurate to say that Christians are only want the babies to be born, they don't care after that. And I was trying to decide how to share how inaccurate this is, and the best thing I could come up with is I'm going to overwhelm you with statistics for a couple of minutes. These statistics are easily verifiable. You don't have to look hard to find them. The reality is all of those issues from foster care to adoption Christians are very involved in all of those issues for children. Well, let me show you some statistics. Christians who attend church donate 3 times the percentage of their income compared to non-church goers that they give to charitable organizations. It's not even close. And since 2010, Christians, their giving to adoption agencies has risen by 81%, and their giving to orphan care ministry has risen by 90%. They're very involved and invested in these issues. 45% of Christians volunteer their time to non-religious, this is not church, non-religious charitable organizations compared to 27% of non-church attenders. In fact, Christians are twice as likely to adopt than the general population. In fact, it's more than twice. Christians are more likely to adopt older children and special needs children and hard-to-place children than the general population. And 65% of foster parents are Christians, 65%. And when a disaster strikes, it's Christian organizations and Christian volunteers that make up the largest disaster, hunger, and poverty relief forces in the world. Hurricane Ian, we heard all about that for a few days, and then probably you're not thinking about it regularly unless you have someone who lives down there. But we don't hear about it. But right now, still down there are groups like Samaritan's Purse, World Vision, Convoy of Hope, Salvation Army. And when you put it together, it's Christian organizations. They're the largest mobilized force whenever it comes to a disaster striking. When it comes to adoption, 2% of U.S. households adopt. And 2.5 times that amount, Christian households, 5% of Christian households adopt. 65% of church-going Christians support the poor with time, money, or goods. That's not through their church. That's on their own, apart from their church giving. That compares to 41% of those who don't go to church that do the same. And then beyond that, we have pregnancy resource centers. And pregnancy resource centers, this is where the argument often comes in. The pregnancy centers are simply trying to stop women from aborting, and they're so much more than that. You look at pregnancy resource centers compared to Planned Parenthood, it's an interesting comparison. Planned Parenthood receives over $500 million a year from the federal government to be involved in the services they offer. Pregnancy resource centers receive no government money. Planned Parenthood, they charge for their services. Pregnancy resource centers do all that they do for free, no charge. Both of them receive donations from other people, but it's pregnancy resource centers that are 100% dependent on people's just chosen generosity. And the last year that I've seen numbers for, 2019, let me just show you what pregnancy resource centers have done. They have provided goods and services worth $266 million that year, $266 million, all free of charge. That includes 730,000 pregnancy tests, 486,000 ultrasound exams, 160,000 STI exams, 1.7 million parenting classes for moms and dads. They're not just pro-birth, they're pro-life. They want to help equip parents. 1.3 million packs of diapers for free, 2 million baby outfits for free, 19,000 strollers for free, 30,000 car seats for free, countless blankets, pack-and-plays, cribs. The accusation that pregnancy resource centers are Christians, they only care about the baby being born, they don't care about what's best for the baby after birth, is just an inaccurate assumption. This last week, we went to a couple of centers here in our area just to show these are centers that are very much pro-life, not just pro-birth. Here's what a couple of ministries in our area do. Take a look at this video.
Hi you guys, I'm Erin Minnis. I'm the regional manager here at Life Options. Did you know that most women have abortions because of lack of support? Here at Life Options, we offer many opportunities for women to be supported. First is our free store that you're here at today. We have 2 of those here in Vancouver, 1 in Stevenson and 1 opening in Kelso. We also have an amazing advocacy program, and that's where women can call and speak to other women about rent support, if they're searching for that, child support, or daycare, funding and looking for food and those sort of resources. And then also if they just want someone to talk to. And then third is our Teen Night. It's an amazing program we have here where once a month teens can come in if they're pregnant or if they have children and then get to be with other people who are experiencing the same thing as they are. We also do some education classes with them as well, but most of all it's just fun and getting to know people who are in the same situation. We are grateful to be partnering with other organizations in our area, like Life Options 360.
Hi, welcome to Options 360 Women's Clinic. I'm Maria and I'm the executive assistant here. Options 360 offers free medical and educational services to women in the community for their sexual health. Some of the medical services we offer include STD testing and treatment, well woman exams, pregnancy testing, first quarter diagnostic ultrasounds, IUD and Nexplanon removal, fertility awareness, education, and soon prenatal care up to 20 weeks. An important part of the services we offer are our PEP classes and our material assistance. Some of the classes we offer include parenting, life skills such as budgeting, and how to navigate baby's first year. Parents have the opportunity to earn PEP points by taking the parenting classes, and they can use them to get baby clothes, formula, and other baby supplies, as well as maternity clothes and bigger things such as car seats, cribs, strollers, and baby monitors. Through these resources, we have the opportunity to provide holistic care to mothers and families both during pregnancy and after birth.
The idea that pregnancy resource centers or Christians are simply wanting to have babies born and don't care what happens after, it's not accurate. It's an inaccurate assumption. The second response I'd give to it is this: it's an unrealistic expectation. It's an unrealistic expectation. What I mean by that is this: no one can be equally passionate about every issue of justice in our world. You just can't be. It's not possible. Imagine saying to the American Cancer Society, you have no right to focus on cancer unless you're also working to overcome AIDS, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. That's what people are saying to those of us who are passionate about the pro-life movement. You have no right unless you're a foster parent, unless you adopt, what are you doing to solve poverty for children, those kinds of things. Well, the Cancer Society focuses on cancer, and that's okay. They can't solve every issue. Or imagine saying to the American Heart Association, you cannot be working to eliminate cardiac arrest unless you also fund research for stopping all forms of life, ALS, strokes, Alzheimer's disease. That's just not reasonable. It's true. Imagine saying to Clark County Food Bank that our church has been very involved with, helping them as they assist people with food insecurity issues. Imagine going to Clark County Food Bank and saying, hey, I appreciate what you're doing about food insecurity in our county, but what are you doing about homelessness? They would say, well, no, this is the area we're focused on. There's other ministries that focus on homelessness. Or imagine going to Open House Ministries and saying, I love what you're doing for the homeless, but what are you doing about food insecurity? They say, well, Clark County Food Bank, we're trusting them to keep focusing on that. It's not reasonable. You can care about many issues, but you can't be equally invested or involved with all of them. You can't be, and that's okay. And here's what you'll find. That's not just true with an organization. That's also true individually. You've heard me say before, I think every Christian should be passionate about some area of justice. Find an area that you're passionate about and be involved and invested in it. But here's what you're going to find. You're going to be tempted to think everyone else should be equally involved and invested in what you're passionate about, and that's not true. And you're going to find others that are involved or invested in other areas of justice are going to pressure you to get as involved and invested as they are. And that's not reasonable. It's just not a realistic expectation. When the day I got a phone call when cancer hit our family close to home, it was 5:01 p.m. I looked at my phone as my phone rang, 5:01 p.m. on a Friday, and we were getting a report on our daughter's scan that they had done, the MRI, and they said, hey, as we look at it, we really think this is probably cancer. You have to get a biopsy, but you need to go to MD Anderson tomorrow. And it's Friday at 5 o'clock. We're supposed to go to MD Anderson on a Saturday. As a parent hearing this, it creates all kinds of feelings and emotions. So I was outside when I took the call because we had guests visiting us that weekend. I called my wife out and told her, and my very next phone call was to a friend of mine named Jamie. Jamie's husband had died of brain cancer 10 years earlier. And for the 10 years after that, Jamie, she's raised, now we're at 14 years. So it's $7 or $8 million she's raised to help with brain cancer research out of MD Anderson. So when I heard them say go to MD Anderson tomorrow, when I heard MD Anderson, which is a world-renowned cancer hospital about 20 miles from our house there when we lived down in Houston, the first thing I thought of was Jamie, because she's raised so much money for brain cancer research at MD Anderson. So I called her and said, Jamie, here's the report I've been given. What do I do? And she said, you're going to hang up the phone and you're going to get a phone call. And she named the doctor. She said, he's a world-renowned. She said, I think he is the #1 brain surgeon in the world for cancer. And all of my funding goes through to his research. He's going to call you in 5 minutes. And I hung up the phone, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, this world-renowned surgeon for brain cancer called me and asked me 100 questions, and I had answers to about 2 of them, and just kept saying, I don't know. Well, do you have the scan? Can you send it to me? I don't have the scan. Well, what did it look like? I don't know. And he just was asking questions, said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. He said, I have you hang up the phone. I'm going to make a phone call to the best adolescent bone cancer surgeon in the world. And she works right here at MD Anderson. She's going to call you. And I hung up the phone, and sure enough, that weekend, it was the next day, she called, and we were on our way to the hospital soon after. And I just was overwhelmed with thankfulness. And here's what I was not overwhelmed with. I did not call my friend Jamie, who's raised $7 or $8 million for brain cancer research, and said, Jamie, hey, I'm so thankful for that $7 or $8 million you've raised for brain cancer research, but I have a question for you. How much have you raised for bone cancer research? Of course I didn't ask that. That would be rude, impolite, and unrealistic. It is okay. If there's someone that is only passionate about abortion and is not equally passionate about adoption, that's okay. No one can be equally passionate about all of them. The question is, are Christians passionate about adoption? Yes, 2.5 times more than the general population. Are they passionate about foster care? Yes, 65% of foster parents are Christians. So it's an inaccurate assumption and it's an unrealistic expectation, but it's a common statement made that you're not pro-life, you're just pro-birth. Christians do more for children, not just seeing they come to breathe air of their own ability, but also after. A second accusation that has commonly been made in the last few months is this: every child should be a wanted child. And this is not a new one. This, for decades, has been one of Planned Parenthood's, it's one of their main statements. Planned Parenthood says every child should be a wanted child. In other words, if an unplanned pregnancy happens and you don't want that child, then they shouldn't be forced to carry that child. They should be allowed to terminate that fetus. They would say it like this: when women are forced to give birth, they're calling it forced pregnancy, by the way, and they're not talking about physical rape. They're saying if a woman has to stay pregnant, it's a forced pregnancy. It will result in more issues of childhood poverty, abuse, and neglect. The logic that makes sense, is that if a woman has an unplanned pregnancy and she doesn't want to have a baby and she's not allowed to abort that baby, then that baby will not be cared for well. So their statement is every child should be a wanted child. And Christians hear this and think, well, yeah, that's true. And if these are gonna increase, then is this an issue I should be talking about? Let me give you 3 thoughts on this. Every child, a wanted child. The first one is this: the unborn is a human being. We have to keep bringing that back to mind. That's why I told you in week number 1, what about the baby, what about the baby, what about the baby? In these situations, this is where they want to focus in on the woman that's in an incredibly difficult moment and forget about the baby. So if the baby is a human being, and biblically, theologically, scientifically, it is a human being. So we can't simply terminate a human being because they're not wanted. We wouldn't even be talking about this if it was someone who gave birth and 2 hours later said, what am I thinking? I don't want this baby. We wouldn't allow her to terminate that born child. So it's a human being. There has to be another solution. I realize that woman in an incredibly difficult situation may not want to keep that baby, but her only other solution is not simply abortion. Which brings me to my second thought. There is no such thing as an unwanted child. There's no such thing as an unwanted child. Every child is a wanted child. The question is, by whom? Those in the field of adoption say there's 1 or 2 million people that are longing to adopt, but because of low birth rate, because of abortion, because of the cost of adoption, it's not readily available to them. If you've been part of New Heights Church for any length of time, then you know the Paulson family. Paulson family, Scott was on staff here for over 20 years. They have 4 children, Jay and Renee and Kai and Levi. Scott is now a pastor in the Tri-Cities area. And their oldest son, Jay, you could see if you look, he's got an artificial limb. He was born with fibrosarcoma, which is a soft tissue cancer that he was born with it. And so they had to amputate. It was wrapped around his ankle. And so they had to amputate him just on his left leg, just above the ankle. The margins weren't wide enough, so they ended up amputating below the knee. And if you know Jay, I think he's in 10th grade this year. This does not slow this kid down at all. This summer, Sue and I ran into him here in the area and said, hey, Jay, what are you doing? He said, I came over to hang out with some friends today. We're going to go cliff jumping. Of course you are. Of course you are, Jay. But with Scott and Lisa, they had Jay and then Renee, and Scott and Lisa began talking about adoption. And I mentioned earlier the statistic that older children, special needs children, children that have a disability are much more difficult to adopt. So here's what they said. They said, well, we want to adopt. God's burdened our heart for it. And We know how to parent a child with a limb disability, so they asked for it. They asked to adopt children that either are missing a limb or have a disability. And that's where Kai and Levi came into play. And man, I love these kids. Kai was born with a deformed hand, and Levi was born without thumbs and a clubbed hand. They ended up doing surgery to give him took one of his fingers to make it similar to a thumb. But they adopted both of them separately at different times, different parents, both at about 2 years of age. Kai was found outside a busy business center in China. And man, the emotion is hitting me as I think about, I know that the Paulson kids watch our services at some point during the week, and I would just say to Kai, you are not just loved now, you were loved by your mom. Kai's mom left her outside of this busy business center so she would be found, and she left a note with Kai's name and her birth date, wrapped in this blanket and with some formula. And Scott and Lisa were able to adopt her, just a precious, precious baby. And now she's growing up. Here's a picture of her this summer with her mom, just growing up into a beautiful young woman. And then there's my little buddy Levi. Levi, again, born without thumbs, a clubbed hand, and we know less about his story. You know, with Kai, why did they leave her? We don't know. Was it because of her hand deformity? Was it because of the deformity? And she's a girl. You know, in China, you want to, if you're going to have one child and one child policy, you want a boy, not a girl. Is it the dad said we can't take care of her? Did they feel like they didn't have the capacity? We have no idea. We know with that note it indicates she was loved. Levi, we know less about. He was left outside of a medical clinic, so they wanted someone to care for Levi. Here's a picture of Levi with his dad this summer. This summer, Scott and Levi were here. There was some event we had. I don't know if it was our worship night, and they were sitting in here, and Levi said, hey, Dad, can I go to the lobby and talk to people? I guess he was bored by what we were doing in here, but so Levi went and he, just chatted everybody up, just everybody's buddy. And in our culture, because of the deformity that Kai and Levi were born with, there would be people that would say, well, they were unwanted. And anybody who thinks that Kai and Levi are unwanted, they don't know Kai and Levi. I've thought about this the last few weeks when I reached out to the Paulsons to ask if I could tell their story. And I've thought about this a lot. And I've prayed a few times in the last few weeks that God would, in a way that we don't know how he would do it, but miraculously would somehow let Kai and Levi's moms know that their children are so, so loved. And the thought of every child, a wanted child, yes, very wanted. And the Paulsons, they don't want to be viewed as heroes. They're simply trying to live out the implications of the gospel. And they and many others in our church, including JP and Abby Mumley, have adopted. Many of you at all our campuses have adopted. I love the beautiful picture of the gospel through adoption. So there is no such thing as an unwanted child. There's someone who longs to love every child. A couple side notes. I want to make sure I say this. There's a difference between an unwanted child and a parent who's unable to properly care for the child. Did you catch that? There's a difference between an unwanted child and do you want to go back to singing here? That's a good song. Okay. There's a difference between an unwanted child and a parent who's unable to properly care for the child. There's a big difference there. And just because a woman has an unplanned pregnancy, that does not mean that child is unwanted. Something changes in them and they want that child. And a woman who carries that baby to term and gives birth and places it for an adoption is a hero. That does not mean that child is unwanted. That means at this moment, They believe there's someone else who could better care. And so many stories I've heard of people who were involved in helping choose where their child would be placed. Adoption is beautiful. It's beautiful. It's a picture of the gospel. A side note also I want to mention, and I mention this, I think especially just thinking about Kai and Levi and their story and Jay, that I just want all of us, just to kind of off topic, but it matters. For the Christian, every disability is temporary. Everyone. And the day will come. There will be a day when every challenge that our culture sees as a disability will be gone. So every child should be a wanted child, I agree. And every unborn person is a human being, and there is no such thing as an unwanted child. And thirdly, on this briefly, adoption is an illustration of the gospel. Adoption illustrates the gospel. Ephesians chapter 1 says this: "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who's blessed us in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing in Christ. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight." Then it says, "In love, he predestined us for adoption." Spiritually, if we follow Jesus, we've been adopted into the family of God through Jesus, in accordance with the reason, his pleasure and will. Not something in us, his pleasure and will. And the purpose of it is to the praise of God's incredible, glorious grace. And that same grace he's freely given us through Jesus. Adoption is an illustration of the gospel. And that's why Christians love adoption. That's why so many Christians have adopted. It's a beautiful thing. Every child should be a wanted child. Well, that's right. And I would say this: the only unwanted child is the unmet child. Many in our church, I've heard from several that have a child with a significant challenge, disability, even Down syndrome. And I've talked before, a year ago maybe, about how I think it's the country of Sweden brags about how Down syndrome has been eliminated in their culture. No baby is born with Down syndrome, not because of a medical advancement, but because they test and they all abort those that have Down syndrome. Find a parent who has a child with Down syndrome and say, "I bet that's an unwanted child." You might want to clear the area. They might get a little angry. Every parent that has a child that has a unique set of challenging circumstances, that child is a wanted child. The third response often given is this: if abortion becomes illegal, thousands of women will die by illegal abortion. If abortion becomes illegal, then thousands of women will die. And the idea is this: if it becomes illegal, women will still seek abortions, but they'll do it illegally, and many will die as a result, and typically they die because of infection. And they'll often use images like this: a coat hanger with "This is not health care," indicating a coat hanger, a self-abortion using a hanger. Or protesters will hold signs with hangers with blood indicating "Never again." Or they'll even pass out hangers with a wrapping around it that say, "Warning, this is not a surgical instrument. Keep abortion safe and legal." They don't emphasize the rare part anymore, just safe and legal. Where this comes from is this: that the claim is 5,000 to 10,000 women died every year pre-Roe v. Wade because they sought an illegal abortion. 5,000 to 10,000. So the statement is, we're going to go back to that. And those that are trying to outlaw abortion, their blood will be on your hands, because 5,000 to 10,000 women are going to die because they will pursue abortion. 4 responses to this. Number 1, this argument only works if the unborn's not a human being. We go back to the same thing. We're focusing on the woman, which is good. We also have to focus on the unborn, who is also a human being. So we don't say, we got to make sure it's legal for a human being to terminate another human being. Because if this human being isn't allowed to kill this human being, then this human being might die trying to still terminate that human being. That just doesn't make sense. They're both human beings, made in the image of God, and both deserve protection. A second thought is this: the law is a teacher, and it transforms beliefs and behaviors. Laws on rape don't stop rape, but we still have laws on rape. It does change people's thinking and behavior. In fact, let me show this to you, pre Roe v. Wade. Pre-Roe v. Wade estimates were 39,000 abortions in 1950. That was about 210,000 in 1961. But during the 49 years of Roe v. Wade, the average has been 1.2 million abortions annually. Why? Because the law is a teacher. And pre-Roe v. Wade, go back one. Pre-Roe v. Wade, there were less abortions, partially because it was illegal. And what's illegal, people begin to believe is immoral. And so they wouldn't pursue abortion. Once it became legal, then it changed people's thinking and their behaviors. The law is a teacher. It's the same with seatbelts. Before seatbelt laws, some of you are old enough to remember before seatbelt laws, people didn't wear seatbelts. We were told we should, but we didn't want to. It was uncomfortable, inconvenient. Now it's been law so long, and you wear them because it's law, but also because your car's going to beep until you put it on. But also there's something internally in you that says, yeah, of course you should wear a seatbelt. Why? The law is a teacher, and it changes your thinking, it changes your behavior. There's a statement that has been made that Washington State is going to see, I've seen an average between 100 to 180% increase in abortion in our state now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And the reason is because Washington is one of those states that's trying to move closer and closer to abortion on demand, but then some states surrounding us, like Idaho, nearby Utah, Montana, that's restricted there. It's going to become more and more difficult there, if not impossible, to have an abortion. So we're going to see 100 to 180% increase in abortions. I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet, but I'll say that is a vast exaggeration. Because already in those states, abortions are low. Why? Because the law is a teacher. And abortion has been more limited in those states already. A third thought is this. No one would force a woman to abort. She'd choose to. If it becomes illegal, thousands will die by illegal abortion. But we have to remember, just a side note, we're not forcing them to have an abortion. The way Greg Koukl says it is this: a woman is no more forced into the back alley when abortion is outlawed than a young man is forced to rob banks because the state won't put him on welfare. Both have other options. We're not forcing this to happen. But really, we got to come back to what we started with. This claim of 5,000 to 10,000 have died annually from illegal abortions, that's just a false claim. It truly was a made-up number. Bernard Nathanielson, he was one of the founders of NARAL, the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, making abortion legal everywhere for any reason. He admitted the number was fabricated. It was made up, it was stated, and it just grew. And still to this day, this summer, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, you'd often hear 5,000 to 10,000 women will now die because of these laws. Well, what's the real number? Here's some real numbers of illegal abortion from a couple of groups, National Center for Health and the CDC. According to the National Center for Health, in 1940, 1,313 women died procuring an illegal abortion. In 1966, it was 159, and the year before Roe v. Wade came into play, it was down to 41. Not because less abortions were happening, more abortions were happening, even illegal ones, but technology was increasing, antibiotics were becoming more effective and useful. Infection is the number one issue here. The CDC says it was 39, so the numbers are really close. 39 women died through illegal abortion. Interestingly enough, 24 died through legal abortion. So that number, 5,000 to 10,000, is fabricated, it's made up. Yes, dozens. It's true, dozens would die. And by the way, this idea of coat hanger abortions, a pro-choice advocate before Roe v. Wade estimated that it was about 8% of abortions were self-performed abortions. The whole coat hanger graphics, well, not only are they graphic, they're a scare tactic, not a legitimate argument. I love the way Scott Klusendorf talks about this in trying to think of this big picture. If abortion becomes illegal, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the implications? He says this: yes, if abortion were illegal in our country, then it'd likely lead to a few tragic cases in which women died in the course of obtaining an illegal abortion. And a conscientious pro-life policy would do what it rightly could to prevent such cases, but it would not license the killing of hundreds of thousands of human beings in order to prevent the tragedy of those seeking illegal abortions. Every death from abortion is a tragedy we mourn. Every death from abortion is a tragedy we mourn, whether it's the child or the mother. But why should the law be faulted for making it more risky for one human to take the life of another completely innocent? human. We mourn in recent years, 800,000 unborn whose lives are terminated. And we would mourn the dozens of women who would die procuring an illegal abortion. But it doesn't mean we don't do what's right for the unborn. There's an editorial that was written in the Washington Post back in 2018 that was fascinating to me. It was an article about how available abortion is and how those in the pro-choice movement tend to talk about how limiting it is. And the writer in the Washington Post was surprised to find out we are one of only 7 countries in the world that allowed elective abortion after 20 weeks gestation. Only one of 7. And that puts us in line with like North Korea and China. Yes, now with the overthrow of Roe v. Wade, there are about 23 states where it will become, abortion will be less available. And in many states, it will become even more available. Already there's 8 states that it's abortion on demand up until birth. By the way, just a side note, please watch the podcast this week. I interviewed a woman who used to perform abortions, and she tells her story about the last abortion that she performed. And then she'll tell the story of running into that woman 10 years later. You need to hear that story. Let me end this series this way. Thanks for being a church where we talk about these things. Thanks for being willing to jump into a controversial, difficult topic. And I thank you because I know it's not easy to, we like to create weekend environments that you always could invite a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, and this is a series because of the political view of these things, it could maybe not be best to invite someone. So I thank you. Thank you for being part of this series. Thank you to those of you who shared your story with me. Man, I've been overwhelmed reading your stories. Thank you. I know for many of you, it was hard to share it. For many of you, it was the first time you shared it. Thank you. It helped me in preparing this series. And I want to end by reminding us of a couple of things. One is this, that the goal is not to overthrow all abortion laws we can. The ultimate goal is not to see how many people we can get to be involved in pro-life ministries or pregnancy resource centers. The ultimate goal is not to make sure every child that's conceived is born. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is the gospel. That's the goal. And helping people find their hope in Jesus is the priority task of the church, and it remains so. But because of the gospel, there's implications to the gospel, so we talk about those implications. And we're reminded that as we move closer and closer to the Christmas season, that when Jesus came to earth, he didn't come to earth the night he was born. Jesus was a zygote, an embryo, a fetus, inside the womb of a single woman with an unplanned pregnancy. And he was in that womb for 9 months, just like you and I were. And every unborn fetus, every one in the womb matters. In fact, they matter enough Jesus died to pursue the redemption of those who are in the womb. And if Jesus came to die for humanity, even those in the womb of their mothers, I think we should be willing to speak up for them. I think it's what God calls us to do. And so, with your family members, with your friends, with your neighbors, with your coworkers, your classmates, I'm urging you, when the issue comes up, don't back away and be silent. With clear convictions and deep, deep compassion for both the mother and the baby, say something. And I hope this series has helped give you some confidence that the Bible's clear on this, but so is natural law. And may God bless you as you attempt to have these conversations. You know, we don't, as I said at the very beginning of the series, we don't run toward controversial issues, we don't run from them either, and we don't avoid controversy, and we don't dwell on it either. But thank you for letting me dwell on it here for 4 weeks. The goal is the gospel. We want to keep helping people find their hope in Jesus. That is our primary task. Final thing I'll mention, and then I want to close in prayer. I mentioned this at some of our gatherings last weekend, but I didn't say it at all of them, so I want to say it at all of them this weekend. that one of the reasons that a single mom has an abortion, a single mom in particular, one of the primary reasons is because of shame and embarrassment. And I mentioned earlier there's two questions that every woman has with an unplanned pregnancy. What am I going to do next, and who can I trust? What am I going to do next? Who can I trust? What am I going to do next? Who can I trust? So let's be really clear on this, church. That when a girl that grew up in our church or shows up in our church for the first time and she's unmarried and she's pregnant, our response needs to be unified. It is one of love and care and acceptance and rejoicing. And we wrap our arms around her. We tell her congratulations because that fetus in her womb is a miracle creation of God. And we throw her a baby shower and we tell her we love her. Because one of the primary reasons that Christian single women have abortions is because of shame and embarrassment from people in her church. So, let's never allow a couple that's unmarried or a woman who's single to find anything from us but grace. The grace that God showered on us, let's show to her. And if there's a thought in your mind that says, wait a minute, I'm willing to shower her with love, but I need to make sure she knows what she did was wrong. She knows. She knows. So let's be that church. So that when other people that would think it would never happen to them watch us wrap our arms of love around people that are single and pregnant, that they would think, wow, I love that response to it. So one day, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 5 weeks from now, they would say, I know this. My church won't disown me. They will love me and care for me. I think that's our job. That's a way to live out the beauty of the gospel. Let me pray. Father, thank you for the grace that has been poured out on us, lavished on us, the Bible tells us, through Jesus. And God, may we be conduits of that grace, that we show it to others. God, thank you that it is possible to have deep compassion, both for a woman in an incredibly difficult situation and a baby that no one has met yet. Help us to live the implications of the gospel for the glory of your name, the good of those women with an unplanned pregnancy, and the good of those babies who haven't yet seen the light of day. Help us to be a place that is filled with grace, mercy, and hope. In Jesus' name, amen.